You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at KeeleyCompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the two-time national best-selling author of On Fire and In Awe. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, the host of the Live Inspired podcast, and he's the real-life inspiration behind the major motion picture Soul on Fire. Each week, John interviews extraordinary individuals about their life stories so you can more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. Today, we've got a special guest for you. His name is Stephen Starring Grant. He spent decades helping some of the world's biggest brands, including IBM and Prudential and Jaguar and Burger King and others, better understand human behavior. But that's not why you're going to love him. You're going to love him because after losing his corporate job during the pandemic and facing a cancer diagnosis, Stephen found himself in an unexpected role delivering mail through the mountains of Appalachia. Today, Stephen joins us to share the identity crisis that followed losing his career that he'd spent decades building up, the surprising lessons he learned as a rural mail carrier, and how serving others helped him rediscover purpose. We will discuss together the dignity of work. We're going to talk about the power of community and why our worth is about something far bigger, far more important than what we do for a living. You're going to love this conversation, my friends, if you have ever faced a setback or you're facing one. If you've navigated a challenge or you might navigate a challenge in the future, or if you wonder what's next for you, I think this conversation is for you. You will leave encouraged to see purpose in unexpected places, embrace life's detours, and remember that your value has never been job titled. It's about who you are, whose you are, and how you show up for those around you. So let's get after it. Stephen Starring Grant, better known as Steve to his actual friends. Welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
John, it is a pleasure to be here. I'm excited about this chance to talk to you today.
Well, man, when you have an opportunity to introduce yourself to an audience, whether it's an audience in a coffee shop or an airport or wherever you may find yourself meeting new friends these days, and they say, Steve, what do you do? How do you respond to that?
I usually lead off with the LinkedIn answer, which is, I'm a consumer strategist. I have had an eclectic background working in market research. I try to understand culturally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, why people make the spending decisions that they make, right? What do they want out of life, and how does that connect to the sort of purchase decisions that they make? My wife is always telling me, tell them you're a writer, tell them you're a writer. And I've had to get over my shyness around that now. And I say I wrote a book, a memoir about my time at the Postal Service, and I'm getting more comfortable with that. I wouldn't tell anybody that I even aspired to write for decades.
Right.
Here I was, I had been a screenwriter. I went to the workshop at the University of Iowa, but I've always been uncomfortable about it.
I don't think you're alone. I, too, am a writer and struggled with that title for a long time, and a speaker. And the idea of introducing yourself as a speaker or a writer doesn't seem real. I mean, it just doesn't seem like enough of a job, so you make something else up. Why do you think that is?
A lot of writers have a lot of self-awareness. And at some points, I think an almost crippling level of self-awareness, right? You can hear yourself saying stuff. And I remember being an undergrad, and there was a coffee shop just down the block from where me and my friends lived. Coffee shops are not common in America at this point. So this was like a new thing in Raleigh. And we were in there. It was North Carolina, so people could smoke in there at the time. And I remember this guy all dressed in black, smoking a Jaguar cigarette and telling everybody that he was a writer. And I was just like, the way I'm looking at this guy right now, that is my nightmare. That if I begin to behave in a way that's what people go, look at this pretentious jerk. There is nothing that he has done that merits him referring to himself as a writer. And I've always wanted to be careful about that. I do feel like I've earned it now. I can say that. I wrote a memoir and people dug it. It meant something to people. And so I'm going to give myself a permission slip on that.
So we're going to go through part of what you wrote about and then ultimately the story that led to it. And I'm going to be very curious about the lead up story. So we're going to start there. Appalachia. How do you pronounce it appropriately?
Appalachia, and particularly in the Southern Appalachians, which is basically the part I'm in, starts just south of the Pennsylvania state line and runs down through Georgia. And, as I talk about in the book at length, my dad was very much an Appalachian. West Virginia is the only state in the Appalachians which is entirely within the Appalachian Mountains. And
Wow.
so the rest of them, like Virginia, we have the Tidewater, we have the Piedmont, the Foothill region, and then you get into the proper Blue Ridge and Shenandoah Mountains. So we have a number of different terrains. West Virginia is all mountains. It's all Appalachia. And Dad was proud to be a West Virginian, considered himself Appalachian. We had all the Foxfire books on our bookshelf when we were kids, which are about the folkways of the folks that lived here in Appalachia. And so for a long time, when we moved to California and lived there for a while, I sort of thought, oh, I'm Californian now. I've laundered myself in some way into a Californian. And I am. Both my girls were born in California, but deep down, my source code is Appalachian, and I'm proudly so. And I'm happy to say that that's part of the book. Yeah.
You talked a little bit about your dad. Expand on that a little bit. I know he's a professor or an engineer.
Yeah. He
and
was
a professor.
He passed away just before the book came out. And actually, as I was writing the book, Dad passed away. But he was a West Virginian from Charleston, the capital of West Virginia, but spent time up in Pocahontas County with his cousin and his grandfather, Titus Grant. And he was very proud of our family history. The Grants moved to West Virginia basically as the Constitution was being ratified and were there until Dad and my Uncle Rich left to go do something other than make window glass, which is what all the Grants did. But Dad was he used to always say, there's two kinds of engineers. There's pencil and paper engineers and there's shade tree mechanics. And my father was a shade tree mechanic. He was an engineer all the way through like a potato. There was no part of him that was not an engineer. And that is how he saw the world, systems with boundaries that interacted with each other. He was a master fly fisherman, particularly of small water, dry fly fishing for trout here in the mountains. And he was our scoutmaster of our scout troop. He was a wonderful grandfather to the girls. He was a very influential and cited college professor of biomechanical engineering. He was one of the world's foremost experts on the vestibular system, which is the inner ear. It's how the body knows which way is up if we're accelerating or decelerating. It's funny because he couldn't ride roller coasters. He got airsick easily, but he would study what made fighter pilots and astronauts get motion sickness. And that was for as long as I knew what Dad did for research. That's what Dad did.
Your mother also seems like a remarkable person.
Mom, the iron fist in a velvet glove. Dad was from Appalachia, and my mother was from the deep South, from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is also where her mother, my granny, who lived with us, were from. She's a good Catholic schoolgirl. But my mom had a first-class mind. And by that, I mean just tremendous attention to detail, was trained as a microbiologist and a lab technician. That's what she did for a while at Virginia Tech, ran a lab there, ran production at a company here in the Corporate Research Center at Tech called Tech Lab. And they do tests for hazardous microorganisms in drinking water. And let me tell you something. The person you want running quality control for
It's not John O'Leary, man. So
it ain't me either, brother. But Mom and that eagle eye, that is who you wanted, making sure that every single part of the procedure was being done chapter and verse perfectly. And there was an exactitude about her that served her well in that job. And so I had two scientists for parents, and weird that they produced a pretty non-science three non-scientist sons.
You know what? You mentioned your granny. I wasn't going to talk about her during this conversation, but she also had a powerful presence in your life. How did your
Absolutely.
granny help shape you into what it looks like to be a man?
My granny was a real lady, and I mean that in the way that the term is used about a particular, like a upstanding middle class woman from the South. She was a tremendously generous and tolerant person. She would often say, Stephen, conversation is the soul of life. And she could talk to anybody about anything. She didn't drive. The first time she tried to drive a car, she put it in the ditch upside down and she just said, that's it, I'm out. But she always got somebody to drive her around. And she went through life with her ability to connect with people, and people would fight each other to help her out. My brothers and I would fight to get the door for her, fight to open the car door for her. And she would always tell us, like, what a gentleman would do. A gentleman gets a door for a lady. A gentleman pulls out a chair for a lady. You say please and thank you. You say yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And I see sometimes rudeness in people, how they are treating someone. And I think my granny is spinning in the grave.
Yeah.
She was a deeply religious person. She went to mass multiple times a week, always honored all holy days of obligation, prayed the rosary every night. And I remember praying the rosary with her when I was a younger guy. And she was just a really loving, uncritical person and very important in my life.
That's great. So you have these steady presences in your life. What did that little version of yourself want to do when you got older? What were you thinking was the professional path for you?
Oh, I was going to be astronaut, Green Beret, submarine captain, somehow the protagonist of some grand narrative. But there was another track inside me that was like, I'm going to be a writer. Like, I'm going to be a writer. I read largely science fiction as a kid. I was just whatever I could lay my hands on. I read a lot of nonfiction too, a lot of history and stuff. And being a professor's kid, I had a library card to the Virginia Tech Library, had an excellent library. And it became the library by which I judged all others. Like I remember when I went to NC State, I was disappointed in the D.H. Hill Library. I just thought it wasn't up to the same standard that Newman was at Tech. Briefly at the University of Virginia, Alderman Library, I was like, wow, this is a library. Duke's Library, I drove to a couple of times for work. But I loved books. I loved reading. And I did have it in the back of my head, one day I'll be a writer. And at State, I started school as a meteorology major. I loved weather and loved observing weather. The math was my undoing. Most people that get a meteorology degree often get a math degree or a computer science degree along with it. It's a lot of very complex calculus to do the fluid dynamics involved in the modeling. Just utterly out of my league. That is not how my brain works. So I became an English major, and I remember my dad saying to me, he's like, you got to be poor, you know that, right? It's just like, it's like there was no mincing of words. It's just like, look, I will pay for this degree, and when you're done, you're on your own. Right. And I could genuinely say my English degree put food on the table for me from the moment I walked out of NC State. I was able to leverage that in different ways to make a living.
There's a lot there, and I'm not going to make you go through the entire LinkedIn portfolio, but you eventually hop around. You mentioned California. There's tons of stories that take place out there, but you eventually begin climbing the corporate ladder. You shift away from English, if you will, and a little bit more toward the boardroom.
Yeah.
What do you think it was about that path that made you successful, and how tied up to it was your identity?
Yeah, I think the same part of me that was unwilling to describe myself as a writer, I've come to realize, again, with that kind of cringy self-awareness that a lot of writers have, that like I'll very quickly tell people I'm an Eagle Scout, right? And I'm very proud of it. I'm genuinely proud of it, but it's a credential, right? It's like, look at me. I have at least this value in the eyes of the Boy Scouts of America, now Scouting America. Oh, I went to the Iowa Writers Workshop. At least there's that. I went to this very prestigious graduate program. I'm an adjunct professor at Virginia Tech. there's an armor that comes with
Yes.
that, where you get to say, and it drives a lot of people. I think one of the things that appealed to me about military service, which I did not do ultimately, but I thought having a rank as an officer, I thought that'll be, that would be great to be a captain or a major or even a colonel. You know, you would get to carry that with you the rest of your life. And in corporate America, there's a very clear hierarchy. And as you make it up into the lower ranks of being an officer, a vice president, senior vice president, I wanted that. I wanted what I perceived to be the stability that came with that. I wanted the prestige that came with that. And I wanted the access that came with that. And the work I did at Prudential, it was useful to be able to say, I'm the vice president of behavioral science at Prudential Financial, and to go to a conference with academics and to be able to represent your company from industry and to have a bag of money to hand out for research.
Right.
It's like you're Santa Claus, right? Who doesn't want to be Santa Claus? But I've never been a good fit for corporate America. There's a level of discipline and focus that you can never let up on that is really quite demanding. I have tremendous respect for the people that can track the hundreds of different things that they need to track to drive progress in a large organization. It's a very difficult skill. It's a real skill. It requires tremendous working memory and a focus and discipline. And the people that are good at it. One of my closest friends is now a CEO of a company, but he was senior vice president at Prudential at the time while I was there, and often went to him for advice. But his mental grip, I was just like, wow, my ADHD, it was just like great for research, but maybe not so good for being an executive.
Yeah, maybe, but you were highly successful in it. You
Yes.
climbed appropriately within it. You went to the right events through it, and eventually it falls apart. Would you talk about where you were when you found out that the ladder you were climbing up and the wall that you had leaned against began sliding out from underneath you?
I'll give it two events. One's in the book, but I'll give you the one that preceded it, which was Prudential went through an internal reorganization, and my lab had just really started producing if it was scaled, what I thought was going to make a real bottom line impact to the firm, which is a publicly traded company. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
I just got reorganized out of existence. So I went back into advertising agency world, which is always a little more like quicksand, and was working there and at a small boutique shop. And then the pandemic came and we had a big law firm as a client. I was flying from Blacksburg. I was going to go up to Manhattan for a day of meetings and got to Charlotte. I was going to change planes to the big flight to LaGuardia. And I'm walking through the terminal and my partner calls me and she says, hey, just turn around. They're like, the client's not going to meet with us. They've already said they're not going to meet with us in person at all. And they're going to freeze on what we're doing right now because they need to be in a defensive posture. This was everywhere.
Yeah.
Maximum uncertainty in the market. Nobody knew what to do. Corporations, you hoard money, right? You stop discretionary spending and you want those resources to be able to pivot to what comes next. So I can't blame them. It was just bad luck. And so I'm like, all right. I walked back into the Admirals Club, said, I'm going to need a ticket home. They took my flight and got me going home. The woman at the desk said that everybody she talked to that day, it was the same thing was happening to them. And I remember how quiet the Charlotte airport was. Got those rocking chairs, always full of people, those white rocking chairs.
Yes.
Along the people mover, and there was nobody in them. And I was like, that's like I'm in a science fiction movie. This is not good. And then I got a call from my boss, and he was like, sorry, bud, we're going to shutter the shop. And then I was on my own, and I was like, it's one thing to get laid off. I've got laid off before. I've had my horse shot out from under me before. But I knew that this was going to be different.
Yes.
It's like people don't fly to Charlotte to just turn around and fly home. Charlotte Airport is always busy, always busy. And the idea that there just wasn't anybody there, I was like, the world is going to a weird place.
Well, as few people as were there the day you found out you lost your job within a week, There's literally no one in that international airport. The whole
Yeah,
world, the brakes are slammed upon, and your life is utterly changed along with everyone else's.
sure.
But in addition to this, you get additional news, man. So take us forward from there.
I had just gotten a diagnosis of prostate cancer. My PSA scores were creeping up. My dad had had prostate cancer. His brother, my Uncle Rich, had had prostate cancer. They'd both been treated successfully for it.
Right.
My PSA kind of went out of the high normal range, and then it was kind of in the lookout range. And then I was definitely like, something's up, something's going on. And so I'd gone to Duke. I'd had a core needle biopsy done, and they found it. Right. They found cancer. It was cancer they graded. I had a Gleason score of 6, which is the lowest classification they'll give it and still call it cancer. But it's still cancer. And you try to talk yourself out of like, oh, it's like having a bad roommate. It's like, no, like, dude, it's like you have cancerous material in your body. And so I was like, wow, I've got to have healthcare. I have to be able to monitor this situation as it goes on. How can I get healthcare? And if a smarter version of myself would have researched that I was eligible for Medicaid and gotten that, but I guess my upbringing is so utterly middle class that I don't even know about that. And so it's like, oh, get a job. Let's get a job. Let's get a little income coming in. You know, when you're on unemployment, you have to go to the website and apply for so many jobs. And I kept getting these mail carrier jobs from the US Postal Service. They were on a hiring frenzy because they were expecting that they were going to be, and they were right. They're going to be delivering a lot of stuff all over the country. Then I said, okay, well, maybe I looked and said, hey, you get federal health care. You know, you don't have to work full time. You can work just a couple of days a week. And I thought,
Right.
I'll do that. I'll work a couple of days a week, and then I'll look for something else on the other days of the week, and it'll be an adventure. And I was right about the last part. It was an adventure, and I was wrong about everything else but the healthcare.
I have a friend who, at the same time as you, lost his job at a wonderful organization, could not get something else, and he took a job at that time with Southwest Airlines as a
Yeah,
baggage handler.
yeah,
And so he goes essentially from the C-suite to the tarmac. And I saw him this past weekend at a celebration for one of our family friends, and he's never been happier. Working with a very diverse group of individuals and loving his life, drawing forward bags, landing airplanes, and doing everything else that these guys do
that's
in the
awesome.
tarmac. So I'm curious, but one of the things he did mention to me as a friend is it was hard at first to make a pivot from what he viewed as a successful life looking like into one that maybe the world would not recognize is as successful. So for you, leaving the boardroom and leaving Charlotte Airport and everything else you were doing, you mentioned the Admirals Club, success. You're not putting on a uniform and you're hopping into a truck, essentially factoring out the mail that goes into the bags and everything else is complexity, man. What was it like for you to say, yeah, I'm going to do this?
There's a concept they talk about when new recruits come to boot camp, and it's called the shock of arrival, right? And it's part of how they get you to abandon your old identity as a civilian and to start to think of yourself as a soldier or a Marine or a sailor. It's sort of what happened to me with the Postal Service. There was the shock. I went through the academy. I remember being in a room full of people, and I was the only person taking notes. I came in ready. Okay, we're gonna go through some kind of a shake and bake here. There's gonna be PowerPoints, you know, and I'm gonna take notes so that I'll have it ready to, you know, when the whatever exam happens or whatever, I'll be ready for that. And I remember sitting down. At one point, I looked up from the room and I thought, there is nobody else in this room taking notes. And then I realized it's like I've had a pretty different life than my fellow trainees in this room. You know, when we did the driver training where we were driving the LLVs, which are the government-owned vehicle and it had all those mirrors on the outside of it. If you were over the age of 35 and you'd done a lot of driving with a car without sensors on it, you were doing good on the course. But I remember there was a dude who was probably 60 years old, and he had been a bus driver He was a youth minister and a bus driver for the school district where he lived. And it was like watching ballet, watch this guy do the driving test. And I thought, okay, this guy has driven a school bus with other people's kids in it for how many years? Like, he's got a set of skills that I can only dream of. And you get into your friend, the baggage handler. It's like, it's not just that you're not in the C-suite anymore, right? It's not just that you're not an executive. You don't have all the kind of trappings that come with that, right? You come into a new job and you're the new guy. You are the rookie. And you're viewed with a level of suspicion. You're tolerated, right? And I wasn't used to that. I was used to, let's welcome Steve, our new director of consumer research, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's excited to meet you. Everybody's like, who is this dinosaur that just showed up to be a letter carrier? And I tell people there is no one thing about delivering the mail, which is hard, but putting them all together in the right order and doing your job in the amount of time you have to do it, that's the hard thing. And there are so many little things you got to get right that really only towards the end of my year in the Postal Service was I reliably doing most of them. The character Wade in the book was one of the super carriers that I really looked up. I just like, this guy is like amazing. And I carried his route for a few weeks and was just blown away by how easy he made it look.
Right.
And even to one of my very last days there, I remember Wade going, "Did you check the hot case, Steve?" I was like, didn't check the hot case. Got to go check the hot case. And grab those sort of random mail out of the hot case and sort it into your stuff before you get on the road. So there's just a lot of complexity to it. A customer sees you kind of cruise up, you put some mail in the box, maybe you walk a package up, chit chat if the customer's in the yard. You are seeing like 0.5% of the 100% of what it takes to be a letter carrier. They just see the easy part, just like, just stick it in the box.
So you and I were talking before we started recording that my father-in-law was a letter carrier, and it was a Marine. Oftentimes veterans come out of the service and they join as letter carriers, and that's what my father-in-law did. And a couple great stories quickly about my father-in-law, Joe. The first is I asked him for the right and the honor of marrying his daughter while he was at work. I wasn't sure how else to do it, without her being aware of it. So I showed up at the Postal Service and there's all those trucks and all these women and men. And then I see Joe's truck pull up and I jumped out and ran over and asked for the ride and he blessed it, which was awesome. But what I remember most about his work was when he passed away years later at his wake. So many folks came up through the line greeting our family who he delivered mail to. It's like it's so transactional. It's a letter carrier in and out, it seems. And yet, on his route, he had built a sincere, honest, awesome relationship with the ladies and gentlemen he served the mail to. And they passed forward these beautiful stories. I'm sure you have your own stories during the time as a letter carrier where you built up a relationship with that person or two or more. So, what were some of the stories that moved you to recognize this isn't just letter carrying, it's mission work?
One of the things I tell people that I was surprised by, and then in hindsight, I'm like, of course, but the great thing about being a letter carrier is you do represent the people's business. You are there for the American people. The job does come with a certain level of respect if you carry yourself that way, if you inhabit that role. And if you're somebody like your father-in-law, who's the regular on a route, he becomes part of the texture and the fabric of that neighborhood and that community. I tell people in the book, like, your letter carrier knows all about you. They know what cars you drive, how much mail you get, if you subscribe to magazines, what magazines you get. But they see you and they see your children. Are you nice to the dog when you get home? Are you nice to your children when you get home? How do they interact with you? Are you treated with respect and dignity, or do they just kind of look at you as sort of like a meat robot that's just doing a kind of a useless task? And during my time as a letter carrier, I had some really meaningful interactions with people. And then there were other times that, I was undeservingly, the object of a lot of anger. There's just a misplaced rage. But nonetheless, misplaced or not, it's like you end up being on the receiving end of that. And it's brutal.
Let's unpack one story of each. Share
Sure.
with me one person or one moment in time where you recognized, man, this is awesome. I can't believe I get paid to
I
have
can't believe I
experiences like
get paid
that.
to do this. There was down Happy Hollow Road, there was a spur road that ran off of that went way up kind of one of the foothills of Brush Mountain. And Happy Hollow itself is quite narrow. And then this spur kind of ran up, spur road ran up really this top of a spur that dropped down from the ridge line. And you kind of went up through the hardwood trees at the bottom. Then you were in the shade on the northern exposure of the mountain, so it wasn't getting a lot of sun. And it kind of turned into scrub pine. And then the road got more and more narrow. And I was like, God, am I going to the right place here? And then screwed into the tree with a reflector under it was the number of the address. I was like, okay, it's literally the end of the road. Came through a 2-track dirt road into somebody had carved a farm out of the top of this mountain. And there was earth moving equipment and lawnmowers and all the rest of that stuff. And then a very neat, beautifully kept home, a couple of nice dogs, and chicken coops. And I was delivering 3 50-pound bags of chicken feed. And the old lady came out that lived there, reminded me of my mama, pants on, had her work gloves with her. And I could tell it bothered her to ask me, but she said, like, would you be so kind as to roll these down to the chicken coops? There's a shed down there that I keep them in. And again, I heard my granny that we talked about earlier. Well, a gentleman is going to offer his help. And that's my job. And so I remember rolling. I was worried I couldn't take all 3 bags at once because there was a little bit of a dip down. So I took 2 trips, put the bags in the shed. When I came back up, she was there waiting for me with a brown paper grocery bag, and it was full of eggs. And she said, this is for your family. She said, do you have kids? I said, I have 2 girls. And I said, well, this is for your girls. They need eggs. And I said, ma'am, you don't have to give me eggs. And she goes, honey, I have too many eggs. You'll be doing me a favor if you take them. And then she said, God bless you, young man. And man, I felt 10 feet tall as I walked out of there. I thought, I am the stud letter carrier of the day for the Blacksburg Postal Service. One of the things she said to me as I was talking to her, she said, like, I should have known you were Postal Service. Said FedEx, UPS, they don't have the guts to come up here. She said, but you all will come up here. And I said, yes, ma'am. We deliver to every address in America. And I was proud to be able to say that. And so that was a superb interaction. It's obviously is a story I still tell. And it really did. I mean, I had at different times, I had people give me cookies, flowers. I had a customer that I would pick up parcels for her very frequently. And she said, give your girls these flowers. She'd cut flowers from her garden and put them in mason jars for me. And I took those home for the girls. People gave me bags full of tomatoes, produce. I mean, you name it. And so I was surprised by the generosity of people, by how open people were. And I mean, it's hard to say. My sample was during the pandemic, and I think people felt a little isolated. But I think it was very genuine. I never got the sense it was performative, that they're putting on a show. The worst instance of a customer treating me poorly, there's several stories on that, but
Yeah.
I remember a woman who was very upset. She wanted to know where her package was. I'm going to tell everybody on the phone here. Your letter carrier does not know where your package is, okay? We just have the packages that they give us in the morning. If you give us a tracking number, we can go home and we can talk to the main post office, and we talk to the clerk and they can see maybe where it is in the system. But you have access to the same information through the tracking on the USPS site. She was on the border of a conniption fit. I could see the red coming up her neck. And she asked me, where's my parcel? And I said, oh, I don't know, ma'am. I said, do you have a tracking number? Everything I just told you. And she's just like, everybody say the tracking number, the tracking number. I want somebody to do something about this. Where is my parcel? And I said, like, ma'am, I did not carry this route any other time this week. I'm just the substitute. But if you, I will go back to the main post office and I will try to find out where your parcel is. She goes, I'm just the substitute. No one takes responsibility. And she just got right in my face and she said, take responsibility, take responsibility. And I don't know why, but for whatever reason that day, she got past my force field and it just really bothered me.
Yeah.
I felt like I was working very hard. Everybody was. And to just be kind of an emotional dumping ground for somebody, it's just like people have asked, what did it change you? And it changed me in a number of ways. But the way it changed me the most is I felt frustrated dealing with frontline workers, gate agent.
Yes.
Somebody at a long line at dropping something off. I mean, you name it, I can catch it. I can feel that frustration rising. And I think to myself, Steve, this person is probably working in a system where they have very little control. Assume they are doing the best that they can, but just for yourself, don't dump on them. Don't stick them with that. You'll still feel bad. And now you'll have ruined their day too.
That's right.
That's a negative sum outcome, right? Everybody loses. And it takes discipline. And like, I will be the first to admit, I have a temper. I have blown up on service people before this job, but I can say I haven't since, because you have to acknowledge their humanity,
You've mentioned in the past that the job helped expand your soul. Those are big words. What do you mean by that?
We talked about like you make your identity up out of your job. It's very seductive, right? I'm a big deal. I'm a vice president. I'm the chief strategy officer. I'm this, I'm that. I go to these conferences. I won these awards. And there's a conflation. There's a confusion between that stuff and your essential selfhood, depending on your spirit practice, like your spirit, your soul. That's you, not all this other stuff. And you spend a lot of time by yourself as a letter carrier. Levels of time that I got undisturbed, just out on the road, doing a job that I had slowly beginning to master. And I don't think since I got out of undergrad, I had that level of undisturbed time. So we're talking 25 some years. And something started to happen where I realized it's like all this noise that had been in my head, like it was riding on top of like the real inner part of me. And that the beauty of these mountains, meeting people at their homes, having a great lunch, knowing at the end of the day I was going to go home to Alicia and the girls and they were going to be waiting for me, suddenly loomed much closer, came into the foreground. In Ignatian spirituality, they say you're supposed to go to a quiet place and listen for God. And if you do that, he will talk to you. I'm a lapsed Catholic, but that's an idea that stuck with me. And it has occurred to me that I got to go repeatedly, day on day, to that quiet place as I delivered the mail. I got to listen for that voice, whatever that voice is. I was given the privilege of hearing it. And it rewired some stuff in my head. It's not like I go through life now like a saint, but it did alter a lot of how I see the world and what's important.
You also mentioned it has not only rewired how you see the world, but how you see your country.
Yeah.
How did you fall back in love with the United States during that year of delivering packages and opening up mailboxes and dealing with dogs that were trying to bite you and yellow jackets trying to sting you and everything else you face along the road? So how did you fall in love again with your country during that season?
So in economic thinking, one of the things we talk about is cross-sectionality, right? Can I look across a whole data set over time and compare things on that cross-section, right? Economists are very good at this kind of thinking. And I had always spent my career trying to focus in on one particular kind of person. And everybody in America is on the receiving end of a machine that is focused in on one particular kind of person, you. And they are trying to get a hot button limbic system reaction out of you because that's what keeps you engaged and that's what keeps you clicking. And I had two things happen to me when I was a letter carrier. The first thing was I got to be part of this massive cross-sectional. I went to everybody's house. I went to wealthy people's homes. I went to poor people's homes. I went to folks that were retirees. I went to people just starting out in life. I got to talk to all sorts of people all across this town that I had an intimate knowledge of, where I grew up. I thought I'd known every nook and cranny, every back road, but it wasn't true. It wasn't until I delivered the mail I just realized like the density of human experience that was here just in this one mountain town and university town. And as I saw that, and I saw all the different ways of people to be, there was a guy that had built a fly shed for himself for his fly fishing raft and his fly tying station and had all his rods and everything up. I took pictures. I said, if it's okay with you, could I take pictures of this? I delivered a fly rod to him. I delivered a beautiful Scott fly rod to him. I remember saying to him, I said, I hope it's your birthday because you're getting a heck of a rod here. And he was just like, oh, it's here. And he said, come, let me show you my fly shed. He brought me in there and I took pictures. I'm going to show Dad later. But, you know, in this country, when they talk in the Declaration of Independence about the pursuit of happiness, you are free to build a fly shed in your yard if that is what is taking you towards how you want to spend your time here on earth. And there was the mom I remember who had Alleluia Frisbee, I think was her name. Like, it was a crazy name. It was a wow name. And she ordered a pool for her kids, like an above ground pool, and all these pool noodles and all this other stuff.
A lot of that being ordered in 2020. I remember
a lot of that. But I just remember the rest of the summer seeing her kids play in that pool.
Yeah.
Seeing people get condolence cards for a loved one that had passed away. But I was struck by this country's bounty, the freedom to thrive here. I know it's unevenly distributed, but it's there and it's real. The freedom people have to live how they want to live. You want to live way out in the country, you can live way out in the country. You want to live in town, you can live in town. And the goodness of people. One of the things that the framers wanted was, they said, like, we think that people are good enough that they can form a government in their own name, and that government can justly govern with the consent of the people there, and that the people in their collective wisdom will be able to change that government if it needs changing. But I believe in people. I think that people, there's enough inherent goodness in people that it's not an insane thing to have a republic. You know, this is totally different than the Hobbesian view of like, I have to have Leviathan. I have to have a giant top-down government to control people. And I saw it. I felt it in a visceral way that I was just like, wow, this country, what an incredible experiment. I get to be part of it. It's not perfect. It needs work. It is reaching towards perfection, but boy, is it not there. But that doesn't mean it is not good on its way to being something better. That was a very long answer. I'm sorry. But that is what happened with me. And it was another one of these sort of, you know, Damascene moments where I really did see things differently as I left the job than I did going in.
So that's what you witnessed during your time as a letter carrier. I'm curious, you were raising two little girls. What do you think they witnessed watching their father move from the C-suite, watching them get off the airplanes, come home,
Yeah.
ultimately put on a uniform, go off to work, come back with sweat stains under the pits and everything else we deal with as we do work like this? What do you think the girls witnessed in watching their dad become a letter carrier?
Well, they're not so little now. So my oldest is now just finished her second year at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. She's in illustration. She's a fine artist. And my youngest, Walker, she is going to William and Mary in the fall. And so they're both in college, and in their college essays, they both wrote about what happened, how, you know, their sense of who their sense of economic security versus economic precarity, that their dad that they thought was some kind of a big deal, you know, and I was like, and that it hurt. I mean, it really did hurt to think that they lost something. And there's a lot of blame I threw at myself. It's just like, other people kept their job. Why couldn't you keep your job? Why are you the loser that couldn't keep a job and just do Zoom meetings through the pandemic? But what they said in those essays when they got to the end of them was, I saw how Dad went to work for us, that he wasn't too proud. And it meant a lot to me. But I see how hard both my girls work, their work ethic, how when they get locked onto something, they apply themselves like hammer and tongs, they apply themselves. Right. And I think, hey, they got that from watching you. Didn't just run your mouth. They saw how hard you were working. They wrote about it in this college essay. And I think they really did take that away from this experience. And it means a lot. It means a lot to me.
Final question before we shift gears into what we call the Live Inspired 7 is, what would you say to our listeners and viewers who feel like they're just a letter carrier or just an attorney or just a stay-at-home parent or just whatever? A lot of us cheapen the dignity of whatever it is we do. So you've been in every side of the pool now, and you've delivered to every part of the country now. What do you want to say to those who feel like they're not quite enough because of what they do or how they define what they do?
I think I love that language. Cheapen the dignity of what they do. And for whatever reason, it's a self-deprecating thing. It's a desire not to be seen as being an egotist, but people do talk themselves down. There's a saying, a comparison leads to violence, right? And you compare yourself to the guy that got the bigger house or the bigger job or seems to have a better home life than you do. And well, what good does it do you? But are you satisfied with what you're doing are you showing up for the people in your life? Are you meaningful to them? Because that is where dignity lives. And it's not easy to see. And I'm not going to say I 100% get it right all the time, because I absolutely don't. But it's like, if you are showing up for the people in your life, you owe yourself the respect that should come with that. And I don't care if you're a CEO or you just started bagging groceries at the Kroger. I do think it's an American, very American thing to do your job and do it well. But I would say don't confuse that with your self-worth as a human being.
Amen. So I hope every one of our listeners and the one asking the question heard that answer very clearly. It's important to not confuse what we do with who we are. So, Stephen Starring Grant, author and letter carrier, we're going to guide you through now the 7 questions that tie all of our guests together. Quick fire questions, quick fire answers. Here we go. What's been the best, most impactful book you've ever read?
Oh, wow. It's hard to beat Huck Finn. I think it's a fantastic book. But my favorite book of all time, most impactful book of all time. Every Christmas I read a book by a guy named Roland Hunsford called The Last Place on Earth. And it's about the race between Scott from the UK and Amundsen from Norway to the South Pole. And it is an incredible book. And the differences between these two men and how they treat this completely absurd, like there's nothing at the South Pole, an imaginary point in space. But the entire human condition is in this book. And for whatever reason, I have returned every Christmas when I have time. I read this book, and there are so many lessons in it. I feel like I could write a book about reading that book. It's so good.
Awesome. Look forward to it. What is one positive characteristic, one beautiful trait that you possessed as a little kid growing up in West Virginia that you wish you exuded as brilliantly today?
I was not shy about telling stories. I would just make up a story at the drop of a hat. I didn't throttle back my imagination, and you kind of get it squashed out of you as you get older and you learn they had a thing they talked about at Prudential called executive presence. You were supposed to have executive presence. And what I have found is that people go through life, they want stories. It's how they give themselves meaning. And I was so free with that, didn't feel limited with that when I was a kid.
If your home caught fire and your girls, your bride, and the animals you may have, everybody's out, you have an opportunity now of running in and grabbing one item, what thing would you return with?
You know, I have a set of my dad's old pocket knives, and I'd probably grab that because they're irreplaceable. And I always remember admiring these case knives that he would carry when I was a kid, and I think I'd bring them with me.
I know you lost your dad relatively recently, and we're coming toward the 1 year anniversary of me losing mine. And the things that I hold on to aren't the big things, the car keys, the laptops. It's these little things that just remind you of your dad. So
Yeah.
I understand why you would run back in through smoke to grab some pocket knives because I'd be right behind you.
Right back there behind me is an instructor's slide rule. My dad collected slide rules. He was fascinated with them. He used to have it in his office, and now I have it in mine. And I think of it when I see it up there.
If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to be next to?
Winston Churchill. That's pretty easy.
What's the best advice Churchill or anyone else ever gave you?
Winston Churchill said, when you're going through hell, keep going. And there's a lot to that. If you've ever struggled with depression in your life, just giving up and sinking into the mire is, now you're in trouble. And the fight in you, if you can leverage it to keep you going, it's the only way you're going to make things better for yourself. So it's a heck of a good piece of advice.
What advice would you give yourself at age 20?
Get an MBA. But no, it would change my life. And so I'd be reluctant to disturb the timeline that I'm in. But don't be afraid of writing. Prioritize that more, And past me, I would give him credit for going like, you tried to make good decisions. Like, it was important to make a living. You have to do that. My grandmother used to say, a man earns his keep by the sweat of his brow. And that's very true. And that is kind of an inviolate principle. But I wish I'd spent more time writing. Yeah.
Stephen Starring Grant, it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
He was a good father, a good friend, and a good storyteller.
Well, this letter carrier, this executive, this globetrotter, at the end of the day was a good father, a good husband, and a heck of a storyteller. Steve, I want to thank you for joining us, for telling us your story, and for reminding the rest of us that the best of ours is yet to come.
John, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on.
My friends, my name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift. Live with your soul on fire. Well, my friends, if there was one lesson that really stood out to me from the conversation today, it's this. Our identity is so much bigger than our job title. I love that notion. You're not a job title. Stephen went from advising Fortune 500 companies to delivering mail in the mountains. And what he discovered along the way was that purpose isn't found in what we do, it's found in how we serve. If you enjoyed this episode, I think you'd love the conversation that I had a couple years ago with 3-time Emmy Award-winning Patricia Heaton. Patricia joined us to share how the loss of her mom, the uncertainty of an acting career, and the challenges she faced along the way ultimately led her into a meaningful second act in life. It's a powerful reminder that setbacks can become opportunities, that reinvention is always possible, and that some of our most important work may still be ahead of us. You can check out that episode with Patricia at episode 282, or make it easy. Just go to johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. I'll have a link in the show notes. Family, I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode. I want to remind you that the foundation is firm. The headwind may be real, but the best is indeed yet to come. So for this time and until next time, my name is John O'Leary. Today is your day. What a gift. Live with your soul on fire. Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son, Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.